What's going on, everybody? It is Fabs here. And no, that is not the lovely Lindsay Rhodes by my side. That is the lovely Bob Harris. Lindsay is off this week. Spring break with the kids out in Southern California. I think the weather has been kind of lousy out there. But Bob Harris, welcome back to the Believe Fantasy Football Show, my friend. What is going on with you? Look at all those fancy trophies you got in the background. I mean, this man is not called the legendary king for nothing.
You know, I don't do a lot of baseball talk, but when the bullpen phone rings, I tend to answer it because it's mostly you, and Lindsay is doing something more important than you, which I'm surprised it doesn't happen more, but okay.
Whatever. By the way,
it's like everything's more important than you. That's all.
The Yankees are 5-0. And I hated the roster going in, like outside of Soto and Judge and the obvious guys. We didn't pick up another starting pitcher. We have Garrett Cole out until like June, and I was not feeling real confident. But hey, good start, 5-0. Hopefully we can continue that against the Diamondbacks, who we beat up last night. I know Bob Harris. Hey, Bob Harris is a self-proclaimed Texas Rangers fan, and you guys won the World Series last season.
I've been to a Texas Rangers game.
My guess is that you couldn't name 5 members of the Texas Rangers.
I couldn't name one member of the Texas Rangers.
Don't give me Odabe McDowell either.
Man,
right?
the stadium is super nice. The food is delicious. I had great seats right behind the catcher's position where the ball is pitched to Fabs. There's an umpire there.
That's called home plate.
Right, that spot. Yeah. It was great.
Oh, Bob. All right. So, if you've been paying attention to the news around the National Football League, you know that there's not a whole ton of it. But there are certainly some interesting storylines, some other things that Bob and I will go through, mostly discussing Justin Herbert and the situation there in Los Angeles. Before we get to that, though, Bob, the tournament is here, down to the Final Four. And UConn, who I loathe, even though I'm from Connecticut, back in the Final Four. It's the first time that two schools, have the men and the women both in the Final Four, which is UConn and North Carolina State. So congratulations to those squads. BetOnline is your bracket headquarters for the season with the best bracket contest out there, and odds, lines, and info on every game with every round right up to the national championship, which is going to be coming up here pretty soon. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices, and even track your bracket real-time all the way through the tournament. Head to BetOnline today and get in on all the action. Remember to use the promo code BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. So let's talk about the Chargers, Bob. A lot of changes. One of the teams from a fantasy perspective that's made more changes than almost any other.
Sure.
And they haven't all been good.
No.
And in fact, I would suggest none of them have been good.
Well,
they hired Jim Harbaugh.
Maybe one.
They hired Jim Harbaugh, which is good, real football. And they brought in Greg Roman. We're going to talk about how that's going to impact the Chargers offense. And then you lose Austin Eckler to the Commanders. You lose Mike Williams to the Jets. And by lose, I mean they released him. They just couldn't afford him. Gerald Everett goes to the Bears, and you trade Keenan Allen to the Bears. Interesting. That doesn't leave a whole heck of a lot in Los Angeles. The only real significant move they made on the offensive side of the football was adding Gus Edwards, who is a really good fit for Greg Roman's type of offense. The player who's not is Justin Herbert. Now, Justin Herbert went into last year being ranked among the elite quarterbacks, probably just below the Mahomeses and the Allens and the Hurtses of the world. Bob, in my initial rankings for 2024, I don't have Justin Herbert in my top 12.
He's my number 14.
Talk about the reasons why Herbert has dropped so significantly in our rankings.
I think historically speaking, the Greg Roman, and we could say Greg Roman in particular, but his collaboration in the past with Jim Harbaugh, their time together in San Francisco, they never ranked higher than 29th in terms of pass attempts. They had Alex Smith, Colin Kaepernick. Smith was very efficient. Kaepernick, a great rushing threat that carried over to Roman's times in Baltimore, where they had one season where they were inside the top 10 in pass attempts, but the other seasons no higher than 28. The other 3 seasons there. He had a couple seasons in Buffalo as well, 2015, 2016, where they were 31st and 32nd in pass attempts. That's the thing. It's been run heavy. That's the expectation going forward. Now, some of that Fabs, can be, due to the fact that, especially in San Francisco, they tend to get out in leads in the first half and nurse them in the second half. But they've never supported truly high-end receivers. I think Vernon Davis had some success there. Michael Crabtree had some success there. But generally speaking, receivers aren't, the people that they're leaning on. It's the running backs they're leaning on. Gus Edwards, you mentioned, has some history with Greg Roman, ran really well, averaged over 5 yards a carry. Guy's never had like the true featured role, but he's delivered when they give him the ball. Expecting them to pair him up with somebody seems reasonable enough. But the concern here is obvious. I mean, Justin Herbert, as a rookie, set a record for pass attempts for a rookie in the NFL. And it was an offensive rookie of the year season for him in 2020. So, expecting him to be as busy, he'll need to be very efficient. And being very efficient does not guarantee he is mobile, but he's not going to be confused for Lamar Jackson or Kaepernick. Go back to 2019, Lamar Jackson's MVP season under Greg Roman, and he threw for 3,127 yards. That ranked 22nd in the league in passing yards that year. He threw 36 touchdowns, right? He was super effective. He ran for 1,200 yards. Nothing against Lamar Jackson, but the pass was not the integral part of that. Just his super high-end efficiency and scoring ability were what made the passing attack effective. It was his running and the touchdowns that got the job done for the MVP that year. It was not the high level of passing.
Greg Roman's offense is, as you just mentioned, very run-heavy. Frank Gore was a good, not great fantasy running back in San Francisco during the years that he was with Harbaugh and Roman. You mentioned Michael Crabtree. Crabtree and Anquan Bolden were probably the two best guys, and they were wide receiver twos.
Right.
And so you go from Keenan Allen, who is, maybe he's not elite, but he was damn sure close if he wasn't before.
He was wide receiver two until he was hurt last year. So, yes.
Mike Williams, a good wide receiver, although he's always hurt. And Gerald Everett was a decent tight end. All these guys are gone. Austin Eckler, I know he had a bad season, still a big part of the offense. Led all running backs in total touchdowns the previous 2 years combined. This is going to look a lot different. And Justin Herbert is no longer a guy that you can count on to be a real strong fantasy option. Even if the Bolts draft, even if they get Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Or Roma Dunza, Malik Neighbors, whoever they decide to take with their first pick in the draft, even that player is not going to be enough to make Justin Herbert significantly more attractive from a fantasy perspective because of the offense. Colin Kaepernick was a good fantasy quarterback with Greg Roman. So was Tyrod Taylor. Not terrible. Yeah, he was startable. And of course, Lamar had the MVP season, but like you said, the yardage was not there. A lot of touchdown passes, a lot of running. Justin Herbert's not Drew Bledsoe in the pocket, but he is not a guy that you're going to be running RPOs with. He is not a guy you're going to be designing runs with. This is not different type of quarterback. And so everyone on the Chargers right now, at least except Gus Edwards, but I feel like the Chargers are going to make a move at running back in the draft potentially. Everyone has lost value. Everyone has lost value. The number one wide receiver right now is Quentin Johnson. Can you say that he's a winner currently?
Is he though? Is it maybe Josh Palmer? I mean, it's like it's like a 1A, 1B, or maybe better still, 1B, 1C. I'm not giving him an A.
Quentin Johnson didn't show me much as a rookie. No. I know it's only 1 year.
He tends to clap the ball. No, I'm not
more of a wide receiver 4. I mean, right now, right? He's a 4.
Right. Anticipated role.
The Chargers had a 1 and a 2 from a fantasy perspective going into last season with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. Now their top wide receivers maybe a 4, and Palmer's probably a 5. And if they draft Harrison Jr., that would be the best case scenario. I don't know if he'll be available. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the pod. Is he a 3 in Los Angeles, or is he a 2 at most? Probably a mid to low 2, because system dictates that wide receivers just don't put up huge numbers. Now that could change because maybe the Harbaugh and Roman have to change their stripes a little bit because they've got a different type of quarterback than they did in San Francisco and Roman had in Baltimore and Buffalo as the OC. But I mean, we're not going from Greg Roman ground and pound to Don Coryell, Bob.
Right. So we can go back in time, set the controls on the way back there, Fabs, and go back
Let's get in the DeLorean, man, and
San Diego.
That bitch up to 88 miles per hour. Let's do it.
Harbaugh,
I
San Diego.
swore now. See, Lindsay swears on the podcast, and now she's got me swearing.
Lindsay swears
Damn you, Rhodes.
like nobody's business. Lindsay is.
Lindsay's got a potty mouth. Yeah,
I am a prolific swearer, and I tip my hat to Lindsay. But like we can go back to the time of San Diego State. Harbaugh was there. Had Josh Johnson as quarterback. They threw the ball a fair amount. Stanford, he had Andrew Luck. Pat Thorman threw out a number, though, our buddy from Established to Run, that they never attempted more than 30, or they never averaged more than 30 pass attempts a season during Andrew Luck's time at Stanford either. So, I mean, but that's the like if you're sitting here and you're invested in Herbert in Dynasty, I mean, you're hoping that that there is some adjustment by these coaches to meet the talent they have and make the most of a guy that they have under contract for a long time, unless they take more extreme approaches.
So the best case scenario for LA in terms of the receiving group is probably Marvin Harrison Jr. as your one, or again, it could be Neighbors or Odunze, depending.
Or it could be all the offensive tackle. I mean, Harbaugh was just talking up the offensive line and saying that's the importance and the building block of a team. Every other group depends on them. They don't depend on anyone. It's a really good point that he made at the owners meeting. So, I mean, they're wide open, but they're one of those teams that has a lot of needs. Brock Bowers has been mentioned there. They have need, obviously, at running back, needs at wide receiver as well. So it was interesting. I thought that they kept the high-priced players they kept were on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe that's an indication that they're going to focus on offense in this draft.
And not for nothing, but Jim Harbaugh's had success in the NFL. Obviously, he's coming off a national championship with Michigan, so he's had success in college too.
Well,
and he came right into San Francisco and turned that program around, and they got to the Super Bowl in the Harbaugh Bowl, if you remember. And I believe they also call that the Blackout Bowl because the power went out. But he's done it without a prolific passing game.
Michigan's run percentage on last year's national championship team was 40.4%. That was the 117th lowest pass rate of the 133 qualifying teams.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about potentially now. These moves are not going to happen, but
you're just making it up.
Since we are in the week of April Fools, which was on Monday, Bob and I are going to talk about some scenarios that we'd like to see happen that probably won't, although maybe some of them will. I know one of them, at least I am keeping my fingers crossed, will. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But right now, Bob, outside of, say, Herbert, because you have him as your QB 14, which means that he is a late round pick. He is going to, QB 14 is going double digit rounds. Who, in your opinion, will be the highest drafted Charger in fantasy, considering the offense and what it is right now?
Well, I mean, at some point it's going to be Gus Edwards if they don't draft another running back. But I mean, to me, he's the screaming value. I'm avoiding. I would say it's close between him and Herbert right now, because it seems like quarterbacks, to my surprise, in the best balls I've been in, that you go pretty deep inside the double-digit rounds. And Herbert, in that view, still is. He won't go there for me. I won't draft him that early. I think there are plenty of guys available later that I have more confidence in, including, guys like Aaron Rodgers, Baker Mayfield. I mean, there's a whole list of players going after him that I would take. To me, Gus Edwards right now is a running back 4. He's going off at right around running back 40, right around the 9th, 10th round. That is supreme value, even if he doesn't get the primary role. We've seen him work effectively in a timeshare, tends to be the scoring piece of those offenses coming up.
Touchdowns last year.
Right.
I mean,
so,
he's Louise. Yeah.
So I think, and like you think of him as like a short yardage guy, but his career average is like 4.91 yards per carry. And for most of his career, it's been over 5. And during his time with Greg Roman, it was well over 5 yards per carry, that's a damn good number. So he's the piece I buy. I'm not super interested. Quentin Johnston has to make great strides to emerge, and we'll see what they do at tight end. I have a feeling they're going to make a move there.
Well, right now it's Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, and you wonder, is he right? Well, Donald Parham is there, Jr. is there still, and Stone Cold Smart still there. So a guy that, his middle name's Cole Turner. You think of these outlier tight ends that the dynasty guys all have at the bottom of their rosters. By dynasty guys, I mean me, all floating around the bottom of their rosters. But yeah, there's no, consistent, legitimate threat at that position.
So again, it's the week of April Fools. And so I said, you know what, Bob, let's have a little bit of fun on the pod. There's not a lot of news going on right now. You know, you've got the draft coming up in what, 4 weeks, ballpark, something like that. So it's a little bit slow in terms of the news cycle. But what if we came up with some scenarios that if we threw them up, and what's funny is I did throw this one up on Twitter yesterday, and I did get some people tweeting me back saying, damn you, Fabiano, I thought you were telling the truth. But some scenarios that we're making up in our minds that might actually be good from a fantasy perspective that are unlikely to happen. And the first one that I came up with was including Justin Herbert. And I said, all right, let's trade Justin Herbert to the Washington Commanders, right? The Commanders have the second overall pick. Herbert would be worth that pick, in my opinion. Obviously, it would be Herbert and some picks for picks, and I'm not going to get into the details.
How many first-round picks do you think you would get for Justin Herbert? Multiple first-round picks.
You would think so.
It would be multiple. So. It would be multiple.
Yes. So Herbert to the Commanders. Herbert now in an offense that is much more suited for his skill set. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, by the way, former teammate. A little bit of a cohesive situation there. Brian Robinson. And they're going to have to score because they're going to be playing in the same division with the Eagles and my beloved Dallas Cowboys, who offensively are going to put up some points. So Herbert to the Commanders. And then with the second overall pick, Bob Harris, Jim Harbaugh does not hesitate to draft J.J. McCarthy, who he says is the number one quarterback in this class. And that includes Caleb Williams. So saying that McCarthy is too high at 2, well, guess what? I thought Zach Wilson was too high at 2 a few years ago, and the Jets still did it. They don't care about what I say. Maybe they should. But the Chargers get rid of Herbert. They get McCarthy. They still have that other top 8 pick, and they're able to get one of those top wide receivers for their new quarterback, J.J. McCarthy. What say you, Bob Harris?
I mean, I've heard this floated around out there by many people, and like I think it's going to be a super if I'm Washington, I'd probably consider this. I mean, franchise quarterbacks don't come around all the time. I've heard similar tales about the Vikings being in the team. They also have 2 first-round picks this year. That would give the Chargers 3 first-round picks this year. And so they wouldn't have the high-end capital, but would they not be able to land J.J. McCarthy at 5? Is somebody going to leap ahead of them? I mean, I know all the buzz is there, but all the buzz started because Jim Harbaugh said he was really good, the best quarterback in the draft. So yeah. I don't know. He is definitely gaining momentum. I don't think J.J. McCarthy, I have it on good authority, will make it past the 12th pick of the draft. So there's that. But yeah, I mean, you wonder, I mean, this all seems a little bit wishful on our part as fantasy managers. We're wish casting a little bit, much like we talked Derrick Henry into that role in Baltimore that we all hope for. We're all hoping for a pass happier role. And if you go to Washington, I mean, last year's offense was certainly pass happy. Sam Howell was leading the league in attempts for most of the season. I don't know if Cliff Kingsbury's offense is necessarily the one that's going to light the world on fire. We saw it. We got a pretty good preview in Arizona. It's very predictable, very bland. He does not move players around. He doesn't use motion. The thing, great article by our friend Jordan Rodriguez from The Athletic about the success of Mike McDaniel's offense and how many teams have copied it. And it's just all based on motion, right? And just you don't see that in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. So I just wonder how great, Washington will be no matter who the quarterback is, but we'll find out. But yes, I mean, obviously we would love to see Justin Herbert traded. How realistic that is, will teams be willing to pony up the huge haul of draft capital necessary to make that happen? I mean, I think they're if teams would consider it. I mean, quarterbacks are a precious commodity, and he looks like he has all the skills and abilities to be one of the best in the league. We just haven't seen it for extended period. It'd be a pretty risky move.
Would also potentially project the Chargers to go after maybe Blake Corum in round 3. That's a possibility. It's almost like, do you remember when Steve Spurrier went to Washington when they were the Redskins, and he basically
brought down Danny Werfel,
all of the Florida guys with him, like Danny Werfel? I remember, Bob, Peter King, of course, we all know Peter, was doing a fantasy football draft show. I believe it might have been for DirecTV. I can't remember. And I remember, I'll never forget it because he said that he thought Danny Werfel was going to be like a really good fantasy quarterback.
He wrote that in his Monday morning quarterback at the time.
Right. Yeah.
Took a great deal of abuse and then always acknowledged after that, that was something he advised as a fantasy, advice, and to take all his fantasy advice with a grain of advice.
Right. But I don't know why I always remember that. But yeah, Danny Werfel, and I mean, they brought in a whole bunch of different Gator guys, but maybe Harbaugh's going to do a little bit of the same with some of his former Wolverines. Another scenario that I threw up there is that Kyler Murray gets traded to the New England Patriots. Now, this would actually be a really good fantasy and real football scenario for New England. Here's why. You get Kyler. He's not going to cost a first-round pick. You're going to probably have to give up that high 2 and some others. I don't think Kyler's worth a first-round pick. Listen, if Justin Fields can't get a third or a second, geez Louise, Kyler's not worth a first. So the Cardinals trade Kyler to the Patriots. The Patriots then retain that top pick, and they draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Kyler, Marvin Harrison Jr. now together in New England. Ramondre Stevenson is there. Antonio Gibson. They retained Hunter Henry. Suddenly that offense could be fantasy friendly. And on the flip side, Arizona, now not in a position to get Marvin Harrison, would draft Jaden Daniels near the top of the draft. They get Jaden Daniels. They also have a second first-round pick. They could draft a wide receiver. They have a whole boatload of picks, so they can load up, and you get Jaden Daniels, who some would say skill set-wise is somewhat similar to Kyler Murray in terms of being mobile, a running quarterback. So we get Kyler, Harrison, Henry, and some of the other lesser-known Demario Douglas in New England, right? In that offense with the backfield, Gibson and Stevenson. And then in Arizona, you get Jaden Daniels. You'll have James Conner in the backfield. You'll get another pretty good. You can get like at the end of round 1, I think they picked 27th, the second pick. You could get Brian Thomas out of LSU potentially. There's some other options out there that the Cardinals will be able to get. They have Michael Wilson. They have Trey McBride, who we both love. They've got a lot of draft capital. Bob Harris, what say you on this one?
Nonsense. It's a great April Fool's joke.
I know it's not going to happen, but like from a fantasy perspective, it's not that bad.
It's not that bad, but is it any better than Murray where he is, along with the wide receiver of choice at 4 or later? I noted my colleagues at Football Guys, noted Sigmund Bloom, notably calling it the Awesomport, Monty Awesomport, the GM. Last year, we saw him move down from 3 to 12, then back up to 6 to get the guy they wanted. Could you see them doing it at wide receiver? The theory is that maybe the Cardinals have a preference for bigger bodied receivers, and they might, that like great though Marvin Harrison is, that maybe they prefer a different type of receiver. And so they could trade down, grab some draft capital, move back up when their guy is available, still get one of the top 3 receivers, whether it's his neighbors or however it plays out. Roma Dunze maybe is a great fit for their ideal. But if you listen to everything Jonathan Gannon says, and yes, it's lying season, people, it's hard to believe anything anybody tells you, but just listening to him at the owners meeting and going back to the combine, he has been pretty consistent in his story. They think Murray is the guy. I thought him coming back from an injury, moving right into an offense that he hadn't worked in. I mean, he was there. So he was, he was in the meetings, he was steeped in it, but he was rehabbing the ACL last year, moved into an offense. He'd been running an air raid since he's a kid in high school, right? This is a different offense. I thought he ran it really effectively, especially you look down the stretch. He had Marquise Brown was rarely on the field down the stretch. Michael Wilson, rarely on the field down the stretch. He had a depleted receiving core. He maximized the value of Trey McBride. I think the Cardinals are all in. I'm believing when they tell me they're all in on Kyler Murray. I do think if I was a Patriots fan, I would think, wow, this would give me some hope. And I can see why that would be appealing on that end. I don't know that it would be appealing on the Arizona end.
The last one here, and I think this is the most likely scenario out of my crazy ass scenarios that I've thrown out there, is that the Cowboys draft Jonathan Brooks in the second round, 56th overall. The Cowboys, not saying that they have any inside information on Brooks and his return from an ACL, but their team doctor, Dan Cooper, is actually the physician who did the surgery. So we've even seen reports out there that maybe Jonathan Brooks is going to be ready for training camp. I don't know if I believe it, but the Cowboys desperately need a running back. Brooks, by many scouts' opinions and folks out there in the rookie world, believe that Brooks is the best running back available. Some would say it's Trey Benson. There are certainly some other.
Some would say it was Marshawn Lloyd. Some would say Jalen Wright. So I mean, it's not a clear cut thing. I think were he not coming off the ACL, maybe it would be way more clean cut. But I think Fabs, you're bearing the lead here. The Cowboys, they're all in this season, and part of being all in means Ezekiel Elliott returning to lead that backfield back to greatness.
You know, bringing back Zeke Elliott is like having a long-term girlfriend and then breaking up with her and thinking, I've had enough. And then after a year, you can't get any action, right? You're failing on dating websites. You're trying to slide into people's DMs and they're not returning any of your messages. And you're thinking, damn, maybe I should have stayed with her. And then you go back and you say, I'm sorry, honey. I love you. Come back.
I feel like you're speaking from personal experience. This is way too of a personal anecdotal situation. You've been here before.
I have plenty of success on dating websites. I just prefer not to be in a relationship right now.
Sure.
Let's not get into that.
Sure.
Where's Dr. Drew or one of the other guys? Anyways, that's a different podcast altogether. Although it would be a fun one, I will tell you that. I don't want Zeke back. I love him. God bless him. He did a hell of a job for the Cowboys and for fantasy managers. I don't want him back. Like, why are you bringing the past back? Like, we're supposed to move ahead. Get a good young running back in the draft. You're good to go there.
Who was the one who first told you that all in meant the Dallas Cowboys were not going to restructure Dak's contract? They were going to roll with him. Who told you that? Who was the first one who told you that? Me, Bob Harris.
Cowboys are just a stupid team. Let's not get into that. Jerry Jones is a stupid guy. He's brilliant in business. He's stupid in football. Bottom line, Jerry Jones runs the Cowboys like a circus.
You're paying your quarterback $55. They take $4 million off. You're paying him $55 million. He needs to take
$55 million. And you know what Trey Lance's fifth-year option is, Bob? $22 million.
Look, they see Trey Lance every day. They know what they have in Trey Lance more than you do, buddy.
They ain't paying him $22 million. That would be stupid. Anyways, I am fully expecting the Cowboys to be a borderline playoff team and get beat in the playoffs if we do get there. It is what it is, and Dak's going to be gone in 2025. You know what he's going to say, Bob? He's going to be like, you know what? I don't need it.
He's going to make a lot of money. He's going to make a lot of money.
I don't need it. I can go someplace else and make a whole crap ton of money and not deal with all the scrutiny that I've dealt with being the head man of the Dallas Cowboys, the leader, the field general, the signal caller. And there's going to be plenty of teams out there that'll be like, Dak in his prime. You look at his numbers, pretty good.
He'll make a ton of money. It'll go to full free agency.
He'll make a ton.
I don't feel like I can speak for all of them, but as an ancient American, I feel like Jerry Jones is probably getting a little angsty and the need to get something done, much like Arthur Blank.
He's not doing it. Look what the Eagles did. The Eagles, who went to the Super Bowl 2 years ago. Now, yes, they fell off a cliff. I don't know what the hell happened to that franchise in the second half of last year. They got better. I mean, I know losing Kelsey hurts the offensive line. They can fix that in the drafts to some degree. But you bring in Saquon Barkley for crying out loud. I mean, come on. And the Cowboys can't do – I almost swore again. It's going to make me nuts.
I think it's been a great offseason for the Cowboys.
The Cowboys, to their credit, have done well in drafts. Outside of like Taco Charlton, we've typically done pretty well in the draft. So I think if we draft an offensive lineman in 1, we draft Brooks or a running back in 2, we draft another offensive lineman in 3, and then you try and fill some spots with the rest of your draft picks. I still think the Cowboys are going to be a contender for a playoff spot. The Eagles are probably going to kick our ass in the division, but like I still think we're a contender, but we're not a Super Bowl contender. At the end of the day, in Dallas, if you're not a Super Bowl contender, you're nothing.
Well, nobody cares. Then you haven't been anything for how many years now?
Since 95. Yeah, we haven't. Listen, man, I will go down the road if you want me to. I'll go down the road of 13-3 with Tony Romo and Wade Phillips and Terrell Owens and getting our asses kicked by the Giants. Actually, back there, that one there. It's backwards. I'm in the camera. It's backwards. You see
let me just say this.
I think Giants, they go on to beat New England.
I think I can speak for everybody here.
The damn catch that was not a catch in Green Bay for Dez. And then the game at home against Green Bay when Aaron Rodgers threw that P on the sidelines and Jared Cook, who normally couldn't catch a cold, that guy catches the pass. Mason Crosby hits the field goal. Tony Romo with the slick ball in Seattle for the field. I like everything. It all stinks. And then getting our ass kicked by the Niners and then losing to Green Bay again.
I feel like we're talking about your dating life too. It's like the same story. It's like you live in parallel universes. Your lack of success in dating is parallel to the Cowboys.
This is true. This is true. Although you have what defines success in dating, Bob Harris? We all have different opinions on that. Anyways, do you have any April Fool scenarios, Bob, that you'd like to throw at us? And don't get my dating life involved here.
The Minnesota Vikings will move up using their 2 draft picks. They'll land their quarterback of choice. The question is it Drake May?
Where are they going? How high are they going?
I think they'll go up. They'll probably go up to maybe 3, maybe 4. I mean, I think the Cardinals,
the Patriots need a quarterback, though.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe they go up to 3 and get there. I mean, the Patriots are kind of team to take. I mean, having the 2 picks makes me think they'll, and I don't even think this is April Fool's. I think this is a real thing. They're going to move up. It's interesting, both they and the Denver Broncos, drafting in that same little window there, along with the Raiders. People think the Raiders might want a quarterback as well. So 11, 12, and 13. There's going to be, maybe they all feel like they're after the same guy, or maybe they don't know that they're not after the same guy. However that plays out. But I think the Vikings almost certainly move up to try to get their guy.
What would 11 and 23 be enough to move up to 4? I mean, like, here's the thing, and I think there's going to be some movement too. But Washington desperately needs a quarterback, so they're not going out of 2 unless they know Minnesota's coming up to 2 to draft McCarthy. But then the Commanders drop down to 11. They're not going to get one of those top 3 quarterbacks at 11. And then New England, same thing. If they make that trade, they drop down to 11. They're not going to get one of those quarterbacks.
Well, maybe there's teams that think more highly of Michael Penix Jr. and think they can move, that they can wait until late in the first round or early in the second round to get their quarterback.
I did a little bit of research here on the first round. And historically, I didn't go back a million years, but I went back last 10 years. In the last decade, Robert, 32 quarterbacks have been picked in the first round. That includes last year, Bryce Young, Stroud, Richardson. Richardson had 4 good games and then got hurt. Stroud was fantastic. Bryce Young was not. I'm not going to include them. But when you go back and look at the first round quarterbacks in the last decade, from a fantasy perspective, which will oftentimes mirror real football, right? I mean, fantasy has nothing to do with winning championships, but the success rate's been like 38%, Bob, right? Like when you go back and you look at these last 10 years, the quarterbacks who I would call elite, and we're talking fantasy now, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. And then you got some other guys who are pretty good, right? Justin Herbert, although his value's declining. Joe Burrow's been pretty good. Kyler's been pretty good most of the time. And then, you got Goff in there. Wentz had some good fantasy seasons. Tua, still too early to write the story on him, but he was decent last year. Trevor Lawrence, I mean, you could throw him in there as well. He's been okay. Jordan Love's only had 1 year as a starter. He was fantastic, but I'm not going to put him in that tier just yet. But then think about the rest of the guys. And going crazy for a quarterback in the NFL is a trend, and a lot of times it doesn't work. Like people go, Achilles Smith or Christian Ponder or Kyle Bowler. Like I can go way back. And teams will always take a shot on a quarterback in round 1, and most of the times this doesn't work. Jameis Winston, he was the number 1 overall pick. He had a couple of good seasons from a fantasy perspective. One of them, he had 30 interceptions. Marcus Mariota had maybe 1 or 2 good fantasy seasons. Tops. That's it. Baker Mayfield is coming off a really good fantasy season. His rookie year was very good. Between there, he played for like 100 teams. Okay. Teddy Bridgewater, he was a first-round pick. So was Justin Fields. Justin Fields had 1 good year in fantasy. That's it. 1 good year. And then this is gross. Trubisky, Sam Darnold, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Dwayne Haskins, rest in peace, Josh Rosen, Johnny Manziel, Trey Lance, Paxton Lynch. They all bombed in the NFL. So I would say there's about a 40% success rate from a fantasy perspective. And I didn't include Richardson and Stroud and Bryce because like it's 1 year. So some of these quarterbacks and the majority of these quarterbacks in the first round are not going to live up to expectations. They're just not. Historically, they have not. So if you bring up like a Penix or a Bo Nix or guys like that worries me a little bit, especially Penix. I don't know. I know
it depends on when he goes.
He's got all these ACLs. He's a good deep ball thrower. Give me your thoughts on that.
That depends on when he goes. Like, I think there's going to probably be 5 in the first round. And then after that, it might be a little bit of a wait. And maybe Penix is a guy that, you land outside and you take a chance on. To me, he's like the polarizing guy, right, of this draft. And you look at the arm talent. I mean, nobody argues that he doesn't have the arm talent. So that to me is like the kind of player you take a chance on later in the draft. You don't have to burn a first round pick. I think there's, I don't know. I'm a little torn on him because I think maybe he's a better player than he's gotten credit for, and people are a little too worried about the injuries because you know how I am, Fabs. I'm a little injury.
I know
agnostic.
you're. What do you call yourself? Injury agnostic.
Injury agnostic. I mean, but I think thinking it's going to be Williams, Daniels, May, McCarthy, and Nix in the first round, and then I know people are pretty high on Michael Pratt as well. Penix, and then those guys, like the first 5 in the first round, the next 2. Maybe second, third, maybe fourth. Spencer Rattler, maybe after that. So I don't know. I'm like, I think if I was like, I think if I was going to take a chance on a guy later, to me it would be Penix for sure.
Any other Bob Harris April Fool's scenarios before we get out of here? Because before we go, this is WrestleMania week, and Bob Harris is a big wrestling fan, so I want to talk about that real quick. Give me one more April Fool scenario, Bob Harris, that you'd like to see happen.
I would like to see the Patriots, and I don't even know if it's an April Fool. I like to see them take a step into the future and draft Jaden Daniels, get a different kind of player at the quarterback position, change the whole vibe there, and go with a whole new look. You've got a new head coach, like a full changing of the guard. And they've gone with a similar type, an archetype at quarterback. Let's change it up, shake it up, do something different. And change the future under Jared Mayo. I would love to see that.
Jaden Daniels and his freak elbow may not even be there at number 3. We'll see what happens. Yeah, it's really going to be interesting. I saw something online where there hasn't been, maybe it's been twice or 3 times in the history of the National Football League where the first 3 picks were all quarterbacks.
Well, I think in New England you're set up to do that. Jacoby Brissett can carry you for some period of time, even if it was the whole season, right? Like if you needed to set Daniel down for a year and get him acclimated. I think that my questions there have more to do with Alex Van Pelt and the offense that he'll put together. But I do think Patriots fans need a clean break, need a new vision going forward, and that would signal that new vision.
Common era draft. Common draft era, excuse me. QB selected 1, 2, and 3. It happened in 21. Lawrence, Zach, Lance. 99 it happened. Tim Couch, McNabb, Achilles Smith. Mostly. And then it happened in 1971, Bob Harris. 1971. So you would have been in your 40s, no, 30s, right? Jim Plunkett, good. Archie Manning, good. Dan Pastorini, meh.
That's the last time the Saints picked a quarterback in the first 2 rounds.
Isn't that crazy? Yeah, that's crazy. Breeze was not a Saint. Remember, he was drafted by the Chargers. Aaron Brooks was not a high draft pick. Derek Carr, a Raider. So anyways, let's talk about wrestling real quick before we go. WrestleMania is this weekend in Philadelphia. I will not be there. Too much other stuff going on. But my buddies are all wrestling this weekend. We've got Seth Rollins, who's in 2 matches, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. The Rock and Roman Reigns facing Seth. I always call him Cole because that's his real name, but Seth and Cody Rhodes. And then Seth against Drew McIntyre for the championship on Sunday. Miz is in a match for the tag team championships with R-Truth and a whole bunch of other teams. So that's going to be fun. Typically the weeks leading up to WrestleMania, I will rewatch every WrestleMania. Now I will fast forward through the stupid matches like Doink the Clown against the Goon, like just dumb crap like that. But I definitely do go through and watch them. Bob Harris, I know that you used to watch wrestling, not so much anymore. But as we get into WrestleMania week, what is Bob Harris's favorite match?
I tried to think of. I tried to give this some thought because I've never seen a WrestleMania ever, like a single WrestleMania.
Really? Why don't you come down, man? Let's watch some Mania, dude. It's gonna be a good one. No?
So I go back. The times that I watched wrestling were back in, I want to say, the early '80s. Like Jake the Snake Roberts was big, Macho Man Savage was big, the Iron Sheik was big, the Von Erichs, the wrestling Von Erich family, Carrie with the abdominal claw was fantastic.
Did you watch the documentary on the Von Erich in the movie?
I did
not. Bro, he wrestled in the WWE with 1 foot. Did you know that? I didn't even realize that, because when he was the Texas Tornado and they were giving him a push in WWE, it was WWF back then. He wrestled, he had gotten into an accident and they had to amputate one of his legs from the knee down. And he had a prosthetic and he wore the boot. And so you couldn't tell. And he would apparently shower with the boot on because he didn't want people to know that he had lost one of his. That's insane. How the hell do you wrestle like that? That whole Kerry Von Erich thing is in the Von Erich.
Yeah. So the old days, I don't remember any particular matches. I just remember the personalities and the wrestlers, and it was like it was fun, but I didn't get into it to the levels that like one Michael Fabiano gets into it. Never have I watched a WrestleMania. Never.
You're missing out, dude. All right. So you don't have a favorite match then? Nothing, like
zero matches.
Not like
I can't remember. I can't remember Bruno Sammartino versus. No, I don't remember a single match.
All right. Some of my favorite matches: Bret Hart, Stone Cold, WrestleMania 13, where Stone Cold passed out and did not tap out. If you remember, like the image with the blood and the teeth and everything else. And Steve actually has become a friend of mine. Really nice dude. Either one of the Shawn Michaels versus Undertaker matches were freaking awesome. Those two matches are Shawn against Razor, and Shawn's like my favorite wrestler of all time. Shawn against Razor in the ladder match in WrestleMania 10 was phenomenal. That was a great match. There was a lot of really good matches between Rock and Stone Cold. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat against Macho Man in WrestleMania 3, which was like the best match of the night. And then I don't think this was a WrestleMania. I don't remember. And you probably have seen this. Do you remember the cage match between Undertaker and Mankind? No. You don't remember that? I don't think it was a WrestleMania. I think it was another pay-per-view. I could be wrong, but you don't remember when they were up on the top of the cage and Undertaker threw him off the top of the cage and he landed on one of the announce tables, and Jim Ross famously said, "They've killed him. They've killed him." Right. And then, you got to watch that, Bob, as someone who like, I know you love violence, right? Like it's, this match was freaking crazy, man. Like,
so I have a theory. I have a theory.
I'm going to send you that match. It's like insane. It's one of the most famous matches of all time.
As I watch you and the glee and the obvious love you have for the sport of wrestling, your ability to recount actual matches like down to the T, I suspect, I have a theory, this correlates with the lack of dating success. I'm just saying.
Toss, I almost gave him the finger, but I didn't. Shut up. You're an ass. Number one, that has nothing to do with it. And these are my friends, man. Like, a lot of these guys are my friends. Like, I'm rooting for Colby. I'm rooting for Mike. I root for my buddies that are, Becky, who is just wonderful. Colby's wife. By the way, go out and buy her book. She's awesome. Like, I mean, that's kept me into it too, because during football season, it's hard for me to keep tabs on what's going on in wrestling because I'm just so immersed in the NFL and fantasy. But I mean, like, it's a lot of my friends too that are wrestling. So, and a lot of my friends are into wrestling too. But I'm going to send you that match. It was crazy. Undertaker not only threw him off the cage onto the announce table, later on in the match, he threw him through the top of the cage and it caved in the mat, which obviously was Jimmy rigged to do that. And one of his teeth ended up in his nostril. Bob, you got to watch it. It's a.
So
I'll
say,
you got to watch it. It's crazy.
I've hung out with the Miz more than I've seen the Miz wrestle. I've seen Miz on Dancing with the Stars more than I've seen him wrestle because I've seen him wrestle that many times.
Well, you know what? The fact that you've watched Dancing with the Stars at all.
That's how you.
I have only watched it when my friends have been in it. That's it. And after they're done, I turn it off. So that's the softer side of Bob Harris.
My question.
Bob Harris, you are the best, my friend. Thank you so much for filling in for Lindsay. You are not nearly as attractive, but I still love you. You're a handsome son of a biscuit. Thanks to everybody for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show presented by Bet Online. I am Fabs. Make sure you check out Bob Harris at Football Diehards. And oh, by the way, Bob Harris has a new address now. We're not talking about where he lives, but where his fantasy content lives is Football Guys. Bob, real quick, give the folks the information they need to know to find the great one, the legendary king, online and on your what is it called? Your YouTube or your MySpace or your OnlyFans.
All of those. Footballguys.com. Sign up for the free daily email. Just go sign up. You can subscribe, unsubscribe, no hassle if you don't like it, but get great news in your email box every day. Absolutely free. Join 700,000 other people who get that same information. Then sign up for the real content, and we'll take it to the next level. You'll find my fantasy notebook available. That's for free every Monday. You'll find me on the YouTube channel of Football Guys as well every Friday doing my quick rundown of the headlines. So check it all out. Great staff there. Great people. It's a great landing spot for me, Bob Harris.
All right. For the great Bob Harris, I'm Fabs. Next time we see you, I believe I'm going to have my boy Billy Enright co-hosting on Thursday, and then Lindsay will be back next week. But for the legendary King Bob Harris, I am Fabs. Thanks for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show. Subscribe, like, do all that crap for us. We would really appreciate it. We will see you on Thursday. Have a great week, everybody.